There are stories whispered through the corridors of time that never quite reach the light of day. They flicker like shadows on the walls of caves, reminding us that reality has always held more than what the eyes are willing to see. Among these whispers is one tale that refuses to vanish, the existence of a forgotten map, a cartography not of mountains or rivers, but of the vast interior terrain of the human spirit. This is no ordinary map, for it is said to have been hidden for 5,000 years, buried not beneath the sand or the soil, but beneath the sediment of collective amnesia. Its lines do not mark borders between nations, but rather thresholds between states of consciousness, the unseen coordinates of awareness itself. To speak of a forgotten map of consciousness is to suggest that humanity once held a compass, far more precise than any invention of steel or magnet, a guide capable of revealing the hidden architecture of the mind and the subtle currents of the soul. Imagine for a moment an ancient civilization, one that looked not outward to conquer lands, but inward to navigate the infinite terrain of being. To them, this map was not an artifact, was a mirror of reality, a chart of the hidden kingdoms within. Yet, through time, conquest, and the slow grinding of history, its pages were obscured, scattered, and veiled until what was once common knowledge became myth, then legend, and finally silence. The great irony is that fragments of this map linger everywhere. They appear in the geometry of temples, in the cadence of chants, in the cryptic symbols etched into stone that archaeologists marvel over but rarely understand. They survive in the metaphors of sacred texts, in the allegories of philosophers, and in the quiet wisdom of mystics who dared to venture into the inner world when the outer world was too consuming. The map was never truly destroyed, it was hidden in plain sight, waiting for eyes trained not on the surface but on the depths. When we begin to contemplate the notion of such a map, we realize that it is less about paper and ink and more about perception. It is a framework of consciousness, a way of seeing that reveals layers beneath layers. Most people live at the surface, believing the visible is all there is, like travelers who only recognize the waves on the ocean without ever considering the vast unseen currents below. But the forgotten map insists otherwise. It reminds us that human thought, emotion, and perception are not random, but part of a greater design, in intricate labyrinth with hidden doorways, thresholds of awakening, and chambers of silence where truth speaks in whispers. For 5,000 years, this knowledge has lain dormant, partly because power fears what cannot be controlled. If people understood the true structure of their own consciousness, the empires of the world would crumble, for no ruler can govern a people who have become sovereign in spirit. Thus, the map was hidden not only by the erosion of time, but also by deliberate concealment. It is easier to command a world that does not know itself, easier to sell illusions to those who have no compass to navigate beyond them. And yet, even in this age of technology and constant noise, something stirs. Humanity is restless, sensing that beneath the algorithms and distractions lies an emptiness that cannot be filled with possessions or titles. The soul yearns for something older, deeper, something that speaks not to consumption but to awakening. It is here that the forgotten map begins to shimmer once more, not as a relic of the past, but as a key for the present. To imagine this map is to imagine a series of thresholds through which the human spirit must walk. The first threshold is survival, the recognition of life itself. Beyond it lies the threshold of identity, where the question of who am I begins to unfold. Beyond identity lies meaning, beyond meaning lies transcendence, and beyond transcendence lies the infinite field where self and cosmos dissolve into one. Each threshold is both a challenge and an invitation. And the forgotten map does not dictate the path, it merely reveals that one exists. The journey is always ours to take. The very fact that this map has been spoken of for millennia in scattered forms is itself a testament to its truth. Whether we speak of the chakra system of India, the tree of life in Kabbalah, the labyrinth of the Greek myth, or the spiral symbols carved into Neolithic stone, we are speaking of echoes of the same cartography. They are fragments of a larger whole, different dialects of the same cosmic language. This is why the idea resonates even today, for deep within us we sense that our inner world has structure, that consciousness is not a void but a vast landscape waiting to be navigated. Why does this matter now? Because we stand at a threshold, unlike any other in human history. Our external technologies evolve at breathtaking speed, but our internal wisdom lags behind, leaving us powerful yet unmoored, connected yet isolated. informed yet lost. Without the map, we wander blindly, mistaking shadows for substance, screens for reality, noise for truth. But with the map, we begin to remember that reality is layered, that the visible world is but one dimension of a greater continuum, that the forgotten map is not a luxury, it is a necessity. It is the missing piece in our search for wholeness, the reminder that the kingdom we chase outside has always been hidden inside. It is an ancient mirror held up to modern eyes, asking us to look deeper, to see beyond survival, beyond identity, beyond the illusions of separation. It does not promise answers but reveals pathways, each one opening toward a horizon more vast than the last dot. To embark on the study of this map is not to indulge in myth, but to reclaim memory. It is to accept the possibility that the human spirit has always known the way home, even when the path was obscured. This journey is not about chasing something new, but remembering something timeless, something inscribed, not in ink, but in the very essence of our being. And as we stand at this threshold, the choice becomes clear. Do we continue to drift in the labyrinth of forgetfulness, or do we dare to rediscover the map and chart our course back to the luminous center of consciousness itself? If the introduction to the forgotten map invites us into the mystery, then the core themes and concepts act as the first unfurling of its hidden geometry. To approach it is to walk into a grand hall of mirrors, where every reflection shows a different layer of self, and yet together they reveal a single, unified design. What we call consciousness is not a static flame, but a spectrum of light, bending and refracting through the prism of human experience. The map does not chart a flat, linear road, but rather an ascending spiral, each turn both a repetition and an elevation. The first theme woven through this map is the recognition of illusion. Humanity has always lived in a duality, the seen and the unseen, the material and the immaterial. Most of our suffering arises not from what exists, but from mistaking the shadow for the substance. Ancient traditions often describe this veil of illusion, what the Vedantic seers called Maya, what Plato illustrated in the cave, what mystics across cultures hinted at through parables. The forgotten map does not erase illusion, for illusion has its place, but it reminds us that illusion is a threshold, not an endpoint. It is like mist on a mountain path. You can wander within it forever, or you can climb high enough to see through it. Interwoven with this theme is the truth of layers. Consciousness is not a monolithic state, but a multi-tiered architecture, and each level carries its own laws, its own perceptions, and its own challenges. The surface level is governed by survival, the pulse of hunger, safety, and reproduction. This is where most of history has tethered humanity, and it is no less real than the roots of a tree are real. Yet to remain here alone is to believe the tree is only roots and never leaves. Beyond this base lies the realm of identity, where stories of self, family, tribe, and nation are woven. Beyond identity lies meaning, the longing to connect the small self to a greater narrative. And further still lies transcendence, where even meaning dissolves into the vast ocean of being. Each of these layers is mapped, not as steps to be conquered, but as chambers to be entered, understood, and eventually released. Another guiding concept of the map is that transformation is cyclical, not linear. The modern mind often imagines growth as a straight line, a constant upward climb. But the ancients understood differently. Consciousness moves like the seasons, spiraling back upon itself while always carrying us higher. What looks like repetition is in truth deepening. Just as the moon cycles through darkness to fullness and back again, so to do we revisit stages of awareness at higher and higher octaves. The map teaches patience with this rhythm, for it is in revisiting the familiar that we refine the unseen. Perhaps one of the most profound insights of this forgotten design is that consciousness is collective as much as it is individual. The map is not drawn for a single traveler, but for all of humanity. Each person is a point of light, and together we form a constellation. One individual's awakening ripples through the field of others. Just as one star illuminates the night sky, not alone but as part of a greater tapestry. The great teachers of history, be they prophets, mystics, or philosophers, were not exceptions to the map, but embodiments of it. They walked paths of inner ascent, not for themselves alone, but to remind the rest of us of the trail beneath our own feet. A theme inseparable from this cartography is silence. The map whispers that truth is not found in endless noise, but in the spaces between. The hum of consciousness becomes most audible when distractions fade. when the mind quiets enough to hear the subtle currents beneath. Temples, caves, monasteries, and sacred groves were less about location and more about resonance. They were designed to amplify silence, to help seekers sense the deeper coordinates of the inner landscape. To study the map without silence is like trying to read its inscriptions under a storm. It cannot be done. The forgotten map also speaks of polarity. Every level of consciousness contains its shadow, its counterforce, its mirror image. Survival brings vitality, but it can also bring fear. Identity gives belonging, but it can also create division. Meaning inspires, but it can also bind us to rigid dogma. Even transcendence carries its shadow, tempting some into escapism rather than embodiment. The map does not demonize these shadows, but acknowledges them as essential. They are not obstacles placed in our way, but guardians of each threshold, testing whether we are ready to move beyond. Underlying all these concepts is a single truth: the map is alive. It is not a static diagram drawn once and for all, but a living framework that unfolds differently for each traveler. What appears as a desert to one may appear as a river to another, depending on the inner state. Just as two people can gaze at the same constellation and see different myths, so too individuals encounter the map uniquely. This is why it could remain hidden for millennia, because it was absent, but because it is experienced, not merely read. At its essence, the forgotten map of consciousness is an architecture of return. It reminds us that we are not wanderers lost in an alien land, but travelers who have strayed from the memory of home. Every symbol, every teaching, every fragment that has survived across cultures points us back toward the center. And yet, the path is paradoxical. We return to where we began, only to discover it anew. The journey is both departure and arrival, both loss and remembrance. In contemplating these core themes, we begin to sense that the map is less about where we are going and more about how we see. To hold it in the mind is to shift perception itself, to realize that life's struggles, joys, and mysteries are not random but threaded within a design that stretches across time. The forgotten map does not hand us destiny, it hands us awareness, and in that awareness, the contours of reality begin to change. The language of maps is never purely literal. Even those who charted seas and mountains relied on symbols to hint at dangers, mysteries, and the yet to be discovered. A compass rose is not a direction itself, but an emblem of orientation. A dragon, drawn on the edge of parchment, is not a creature to slay, but a warning that the known world ends and the abyss of possibility begins. So too with the forgotten map of consciousness, it speaks most clearly in symbols and stories. For the landscape it charts cannot be contained by coordinates alone. To truly grasp its essence, one must step into its allegories, for in them the unseen truths take on form. Consider the story of the labyrinth. In countless cultures, from Crete to the Americas, the labyrinth emerges as a motif of the soul's journey. A winding path spirals inward, full of turns and apparent dead ends, until at last it arrives at the center. The traveler may believe at each bend that they are lost, yet the labyrinth is designed to guide, not to deceive. The forgotten map is itself such a labyrinth. Life's twists, losses, and unexpected detours are not errors in navigation but built-in thresholds, each turn drawing us closer to the silent chamber at the center of being. The Minotaur of legend, often painted as a monster, becomes in this light the embodiment of our own inner shadows, the fears, attachments, and illusions that must be faced before the heart of the labyrinth can be reached. Another allegory woven into the forgotten map is that of the sacred mountain. From Sinai to Olympus, from Kailash to Machu Picchu, humanity has always placed its gods and revelations at the summit of impossible heights. To ascend a mountain is to symbolically leave behind the density of ordinary life, to thin the air of distraction until only the essential remains. The mountain represents consciousness itself, layered from the fertile valleys of survival to the rarefied peaks of transcendence. Every climber who sets their foot upon the path must endure storms, fatigue, and the temptation to turn back. Yet those who persist discover that the summit does not merely offer a view of the world below, offers a view of the self, stripped bare and luminous. The mountain is a mirror rising from the earth, reminding us that the vertical climb is always inward, even when the feet touch stone. The forgotten map also tells its story through water, that most fluid of elements. Ancient myths often describe a great river separating the world of the living from the world beyond the Styx in Greece. The Vaitana in Hindu lore, the black waters ferried by countless boatmen of the underworld. Water is transition, the threshold between forms of being. To step into it is to surrender control, to be carried by a current larger than oneself. Within the context of consciousness, this river is the crossing between one state of awareness and another, between clinging to identity and dissolving into something greater. The forgotten map whispers that every transformation is such a river, terrifying to enter, impossible to resist once immersed, and ultimately liberating when the far shore is reached. Perhaps the most profound symbolic narrative is that of the hidden seed. Across traditions, from the mustard seed of parables to the acorn destined to become oak, the seed embodies potential unseen. To the unknowing eye, a seed is small, fragile, and insignificant. Yet within its shell lies an entire universe of possibility, waiting only for the right conditions to unfold. The forgotten map of consciousness reminds us that each human being carries within them such a seed, a kernel of infinite awareness, compacted into finite form. The soil of struggle, the waters of experience, the sunlight of insights are necessary for its germination. No map can force a seed to grow, but it can remind the seeker that growth is already encoded within them. These symbols, the labyrinth, the mountain, the river, the seed are not separate tales but interconnected parables. They reveal that consciousness is a journey inward, a climb upward, a crossing forward, and a blossoming outward all at once. Each speaks to a different aspect of the same truth, that awakening is both arduous and natural, both a challenge and an inevitability. The forgotten map does not tell us what lies at the end, because the end is not singular. For some, it is union with the divine. For others, it is the dissolution of self into cosmic vastness. For still others, it is the simple but profound recognition that life itself, in every breath and every moment, is sacred. Even myths of descent hold their place in this cartography. Orpheus descending to the underworld to reclaim his beloved, Inanna stripped of her garments as she passes through 7 gates, Christ entering the tomb before resurrection. All these are symbols etched into the map. They teach that the path to higher states often requires a journey downward, into darkness, into death of the old self. Consciousness expands not by avoidance, but by immersion, by facing the very depths we fear. The forgotten map inscribes this paradox at its heart. One must go down to rise, one must lose to find, one must surrender to be free, and always there is the symbol of light. Nearly every tradition describes a luminous source, a radiant fire, or a blazing star as the ultimate destination. This light is not external, though it is often painted as such. It is the inner illumination, the recognition of awareness itself. As radiant, the map calls this the final threshold, the point where seeker and sought collapse into one, where the light we chase is revealed to be the very flame within our eyes. When we gather these narratives together, the forgotten map ceases to be a relic and becomes a living mythos. Its symbols are not quaint relics of ancient imagination, but keys, each one unlocking doors within the psyche. They remind us that the journey of consciousness is not linear, nor is it dry. Philosophy, it is story, experience, trial, and revelation. It is the great myth each of us is living, whether we acknowledge it or not. And in that realization, the forgotten map stirs again, whispering through allegory what cannot be spoken outright, that we are all travelers, already walking its paths, whether we know the symbols or not. A map, no matter how beautiful or mysterious, serves no purpose if it is never used. The forgotten map of consciousness, hidden for 5,000 years and whispered through myths and symbols, must eventually come down from its cosmic height and touch the soil of daily life. For what good is knowledge if it does not transform how we live, breathe, and interact with the world? The challenge and the gift of this ancient cartography is its ability to take the ineffable and make it tangible, to show us how cosmic truths can be woven into the smallest gestures of an ordinary day. To integrate the map is to realize first that consciousness is not confined to meditation cushions, temples, or sacred texts. It is alive in the act of listening deeply to another human being, in the patience extended to a child, in the silence chosen over unnecessary words. The labyrinth is not only found in stone patterns on monastery floors, but also in the choices we make each morning, as we navigate the twists and turns of responsibility, desire, and doubt. Each decision becomes a corridor, each pause a threshold, and each moment of awareness a step toward the center. The map asks us not to escape life, but to walk through it more consciously, to see the invisible threads binding even the most mundane actions into the greater tapestry of awakening. The mountain, as a symbol of ascent, finds its practical expression in resilience. Every obstacle we face, a difficult colleague, a financial hardship, a personal failure, becomes a slope to climb. Instead of interpreting life's challenges as random cruelties, the forgotten map reframes them as integral stages of ascent. The mountain is not climbed in a single stride, but step by step, breath by breath. In this sense, the map transforms our relationship to struggle. Hardship is no longer the enemy, but the necessary incline that strengthens the spirit. We ascend not to conquer life, but to grow in proportion to it, to see from a higher vantage. Where once we only saw from the valley, the river, in its flowing wisdom, appears in practical life as surrender. We live in an age obsessed with control, where every outcome must be engineered, every detail planned. Yet the map reminds us that true transformation often arises when we step into currents larger than ourselves. This is not passivity but trust, the ability to let life carry us beyond our limited strategies and into the greater unfolding of destiny. In practice, this might mean loosening the grip on rigid timelines, releasing the need to win every argument, or allowing grief and joy alike to move through us without resistance. To live by the map is to know when to row with strength and when to lay the oars across the boat, trusting the current to carry us where we most need to go. The seed, hidden yet potent, reminds us that growth often happens invisibly. We live in cultures of immediacy, addicted to instant results, yet the map teaches patience. Just as a seed germinates underground long before the first green shoot breaks the surface, so too does inner transformation unfold silently before it becomes visible. This is why consistency matters more than spectacle. A quiet daily practice of reflection, an honest journaling of emotions, a regular pause for gratitude. These small acts plant seeds that, in time, yield forests. The map's wisdom in this regard is practical and humbling. Greatness begins in silence, and transformation ripens slowly, on a broader scale. The forgotten map has profound implications for how we structure society. If consciousness truly moves in layers, then our institutions, education, politics, economics, are not merely external systems but reflections of collective states of awareness. A culture fixated only on survival will build economies of scarcity, where fear and competition reign. A society rooted in identity will fracture along lines of race, nation, and ideology. Only as collective awareness expands toward meaning and transcendence can new structures emerge, systems built on cooperation, shared purpose, and reverence for life itself. To integrate the map is, therefore, to recognize that inner work and outer change are inseparable. A more awakened individual leads to a more awakened world, and the ripples of consciousness spread outward into institutions, laws, and global movements. In daily interactions, the forgotten map translates into a shift in perception. When someone lashes out in anger, instead of reacting in kind, we can see them not as an enemy, but as a traveler caught at a lower threshold of fear or identity. Compassion becomes possible when we recognize that we, too, have walked those corridors, and may again. The map reframes conflict, not as a battle of wills, but as an opportunity for awareness. To act from this understanding does not mean to be passive, it means to respond from a place that remembers the larger journey, refusing to be trapped by the illusion of separation. Perhaps the most practical integration of all is the cultivation of presence. The forgotten map teaches that consciousness is layered, but it also insists that all layers are accessible here and now. We need not wait for some distant enlightenment to live with greater awareness. We need only inhabit this moment more fully. Presence means tasting the food we eat, hearing the nuance in another's words, feeling the breath as it enters and leaves the body. It is deceptively simple, yet profoundly transformative, for presence is the doorway through which every higher state is entered. Without presence, the map remains abstract. With presence, it becomes alive. The real-world implication of rediscovering this map is nothing less than the reorientation of human destiny. For 5,000 years, we have built empires, waged wars, and pursued progress, often without remembering the deeper architecture of the self. The cost has been staggering: alienation, ecological destruction, endless cycles of power and collapse. But if we can once again hold the map in our collective hands, if we can live its truths in our daily rhythms, then perhaps a new epoch dawns, not one where consciousness is a luxury of mystics, but one where it becomes the foundation of how we live together on this planet. This is what makes the forgotten map so urgent. Even in an age of science and satellites, we have mapped the surface of the Earth, charted the galaxies above, sequenced the code of life itself. But without this inner map, all outer maps lead us in circles. The forgotten map does not replace science or progress, it completes them. It ensures that our outer exploration is balanced by inner wisdom, that our reach for the stars is matched by depth of soul. And so, to integrate the map is to live differently, not in grand gestures alone, but in the intimate details of every day, to see illusion and smile at it, to climb mountains of struggle with patience, to surrender to rivers of change with trust, to nurture seeds of transformation with patience and care, to stand in presence, fully awake, in the only place we ever truly are, here, now. The forgotten map of consciousness, hidden for 5 millennia, is not simply an artifact of lost civilizations or an esoteric myth preserved in fragments of stone and scripture. It is, and has always been, an inner blueprint waiting to be remembered. We began by standing at the threshold of mystery, gazing at a map that seemed more legend than truth. We traced its core themes, recognizing illusion, layers, cycles, polarity, and silence as its living architecture. We entered its symbolic narratives, the labyrinth, the mountain, the river. The seed and felt their resonance not as distant myths, but as mirrors of our own lives. Then, we brought those symbols down into the tangible, the choices of each day, the challenges of society, the way we love, suffer, and awaken. And now, as we arrive at this final section, the question lingers: what will you do with this knowledge? For a map is only as powerful as the courage of the one who walks it. To hold it in your hands but remain still is to let the ink fade back into silence. To trace its pathways in thought but never in action is to admire the possibility of awakening. Without ever awakening, the forgotten map does not demand blind faith, nor does it promise ease. It whispers, instead of responsibility, the responsibility to remember who you are beyond the illusions, to see the patterns that entangle and the light that liberates, to live as though each moment carries the seed of transformation. The call, then, is not outward but inward. It asks you to turn your gaze from the noise of the world and listen to the subtler currents beneath. What fears hold you at the lower thresholds? What identities keep you tethered to separation? What attachments make you circle the labyrinth without ever reaching the center? To answer these questions is not to find fault in yourself, but to begin the sacred act of remembering. For the map was never lost in truth. It has been inscribed in your very being all along. The transformational power of this map lies in its insistence that awakening is not reserved for saints, sages, or mystics of distant lands. It belongs to you, here, now. When you choose presence instead of distraction, you are walking the map. When you respond with compassion instead of anger, you are walking the map. When you surrender to the river of change rather than cling to the illusion of control, you are walking the map. And when you climb the mountain of your own struggles and stand at its summit with humility and clarity, you are embodying what countless generations once knew, that consciousness is not a prison, but a path. This moment in history demands nothing less. The external crises of our world division, ecological collapse, the restless hunger of endless consumption are symptoms of forgetting. They are the natural consequence of a humanity that has mapped the stars but neglected its own soul. Yet the re-emergence of this forgotten cartography signals hope. It means the memory of wholeness is stirring again, that the wisdom buried for 5,000 years is rising in the collective heart. It is not by chance that you are reading these words. Perhaps you, too, are one of the travelers meant to bring this map back into the light. Transformation begins in small acts but ripples endlessly outward. One awakened moment expands to a day. One awakened life touches another. A network of consciousness spreads quietly across the earth until the very fabric of society begins to shift. This is how revolutions of spirit occur, not with swords or slogans, but with individuals who dare to live differently. You do not need to change the entire world overnight. You need only embody the map in the next breath, the next choice, the next gesture of love or clarity. And so, The call is clear. Remember that the labyrinth is not there to trap you, but to guide you inward. Remember that the mountain you climb is already within you, and each struggle is shaping your strength. Remember that the river of change will carry you if you let go, and that resisting its flow only deepens your suffering. Remember that the seed of infinite consciousness rests within your soul, waiting for your patience, your trust, and your willingness to nurture it. Remember that the light you seek has always been your own reflection. The forgotten map of consciousness is no longer forgotten. It breathes again in your awareness, alive in the symbols, alive in the practices, alive in the silence that follows these words. The question now is not whether the map exists, but whether you will walk it. Will you continue to circle the corridors of illusion, or will you step courageously toward the thresholds that lead you home? Will you remain a wanderer in the noise, or will you become a traveler guided by the ancient compass of your own spirit? The choice belongs to you, as it always has, and in choosing, you do not walk alone. Every seeker, every mystic, every ancestor who ever touched the edges of this truth walks beside you, whispering encouragement through the winds of time. You are not the first to take up this journey, and you will not be the last. But perhaps, in your choice, the chain of forgetting will weaken, and the chain of remembrance will strengthen for all who follow. So stand at the threshold, map in hand, feel the silence beneath the noise, the light beneath the shadow, the infinite beneath the finite. Step forward, not tomorrow, not when conditions seem perfect, but now. The forgotten map of consciousness is alive in you. The path is open, and the call has already begun.